compliance. Let's be honest, for a lot of people, that word brings to mind checklists, red tape, and a pretty big budget line. But what if we could flip that script? What if we could transform compliance from a burden into a genuine strategic asset? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to explore. How to unlock that hidden power. And it all starts with a tool you probably already have in your organization. First things first, let's anchor this with a number. And it's a really, really big one. $1.9 trillion. That, right there, is the estimated global cost of regulatory compliance for businesses every single year. Just let that sink in. So what makes that already massive number even more painful? Well, a huge chunk of it is wasted. It gets inflated by a problem that I'm sure you've seen in big organizations. Different departments working in their own little worlds, completely isolated. And the result? Wasted effort, duplicated work, and just total confusion. And that brings us right to the heart of the issue, the main villain of our story today, the compliance silo problem. It's this structure where every single department is its own island, and nobody is looking at the whole map. So you're basically looking at two completely different ways to operate. On one side, you've got the old way, the siloed approach. Legal, HR, IT, they all do their own thing. This creates huge gaps, tons of duplicate work, and it makes compliance feel like it's just one department's problem to solve. But on the other side, that's where things get interesting. You have teams collaborating, creating a complete, holistic view of risk, and turning compliance into what it should be, a shared responsibility.
Okay, so if silos are the problem, what's the fix? Well, it turns out there's a hidden asset that can completely change the game.
And that hidden asset is the cross-functional team. Now, don't let the corporate jargon fool you. The idea is actually incredibly simple and it's powerful. It's just a group of people, each with their own unique expertise, all rowing in the exact same direction to hit a common goal. So who gets a seat at this table? Well, you're bringing together the key players from every corner of the business. You've got legal, you've got HR, IT, finance, operations, risk management, basically anyone and everyone who holds a piece of that compliance puzzle. And let's be really clear, the goal here isn't just to schedule more meetings. The whole point, the big strategic objective, is to actually weave compliance into the very fabric of the company's day-to-day operations. So it becomes a natural part of how people work, not some annoying checkpoint at the very end. Now, when you bring all these different minds together, you unlock some serious advantages. So let's break down the superpowers that these collaborative teams really bring to the table. For starters, you finally get a complete 360-degree view of risk. When IT is actually talking to legal and operations, major threats can't just slip through the cracks anymore. And it also puts a stop to all that wasted time. No more having the audit team, the risk team, and the ethics team all bugging the same person for the exact same spreadsheet. Next up, your decision-making just gets a massive upgrade. When you have all these diverse perspectives in the mix, you just come up with smarter, more bulletproof solutions. And this makes the entire organization way more agile. You're able to pivot and adapt almost instantly when a new regulation pops up or a new risk emerges.
And hey, this isn't just a nice theory. The data proves it works. A whopping 83% of the most advanced, high-performing companies are using cross-functional teams. Compare that to early-stage companies. That gap tells a really clear story. Collaboration is what the best companies do.
And finally, this approach completely transforms your company culture. When everyone has skin in the game, you get shared ownership. And you know what that does? It kills the blame game. No more finger pointing. It just sends a crystal clear message from the top all the way down that here, compliance is everybody's job. Okay, so you get the why. You're sold on the idea. But now you're probably asking, how do I actually build one of these teams? So let's get practical. Let's walk through the blueprint for making this happen. So your blueprint starts with step 1, leadership support. This is absolutely non-negotiable. You need a clear mandate from the top. Step 2, pick the right people. You got to define the roles and make sure all your key functions are in the room. Then, step 3 is to set common goals. Get everyone aligned on objectives that are actually tied to business success, not just checking a box. 4, foster open communication. That means regular meetings and using the right collaboration tools. And finally, step 5, recognize and reward their efforts. You have to celebrate the wins to keep that momentum going.
Now, let's be real. Building this kind of dream team isn't always a walk in the park. You're going to hit some hurdles. But, understanding what those hurdles are is the first step to getting over them and unlocking all that value.
So let's just ask the question straight up. Does this always work perfectly right out of the gate? Well, the short answer is no. But the challenges are predictable, and more importantly, they are totally manageable. You're almost guaranteed to run into some of these classic roadblocks: different departments with conflicting priorities, confusion over who's actually in charge, and team members who are already stretched way too thin. You should just think of these as the normal growing pains of collaboration, and they can definitely be solved. In fact, there was a pretty sobering study from Harvard Business Review that found that nearly 3/4 of these teams are actually dysfunctional. And you know what the number one reason was? Unclear governance. In other words, nobody knew who had the final say. But that statistic isn't a death sentence. It's more like a warning label on a piece of powerful equipment. And here's the crucial takeaway. With active, visible support from leadership and a very clear structure, you can beat those odds. You can turn that potential for dysfunction into a real competitive advantage. And that really brings us right to the core idea of this whole explainer. It all boils down to this. When you make compliance a shared responsibility, when it becomes everyone's business, then the entire business wins. So the only question left is, who needs to be sitting at the table in your organization?